Well, I'm here with Jamie and Leslie. I'm in lovely Ottawa, where it's usually winter. And Leslie, you are in?
Curacao, in the Caribbean.
Yeah, it's a Dutch colony, I think.
Yes. Yes,
There you go. So I'm very jealous. I'm just going through a project that is confidential, and Jamie and Leslie have agreed to treat it as confidential. And what we're going to talk about in the next few minutes is how do you do something I call Mad River financing. Have you heard me talk about Mad River financing, guys?
No.
not yet.
So Mad River financing is the reason I call it, you can't look it up online because you won't find it. It's just that the very first deal I did like this was in a ski town in the United States called Mad River. So I call it Mad River financing.
Okay.
But don't look it up because it doesn't really exist except in my head. And so this is a project in British Columbia that is, the project lead on this is Michael Rouge, and he's going to acquire a site that's about an acre, and it closes at the end of April. And so the question is, how does Michael close on this thing and finance this thing so that he can build a 3-story multi-res apartment building on the property with some commercial at grade without having to put in millions of dollars of his own money. The total project cost is about $12.2 million. And I'm going to show Jamie and Leslie in the next few minutes as we record this, how Michael can do that with maybe an investment of $130,000. Okay? So here's how it works, all right? And it takes a little bit of thinking. Michael is going to, the property will be acquired by a numbered company, and Michael will own 65% of common shares, 1.3 million at 10 cents. So he puts in $130,000 of his own cash. He's the entrepreneur. He puts that money in, and common shares, as you know, are voting shares and control. The private equity fund, we pitched them this morning on this. The private equity fund puts in $70,000. That's it. 70 grand, and they get 700,000 common shares at 10 cents each for 35% ownership. So now the entrepreneur controls this company, and the private equity fund has a significant interest, about just over a third interest in the common shares. Now, to close on this deal, it's a $1.5 million number, and so why the private equity fund gets 35% of the common shares for $70,000, which is like nothing to this private equity fund, is like nothing. It's like not even like buying a McCafe coffee. The reason they get that is they're going to do the rest of the financing. You guys clear on that?
Yep.
So they don't get those 700,000 shares at 10 cents each and say, great, now you figure out the rest. No, they have to bring the rest of the financing to the table. So the first part is they need to arrange a loan to the corporation, to the numbered company, of $1.3 million to close this transaction next month. And Michael doesn't really care how that loan is arranged. It can be a loan at, typically something like this would be at 6% interest. And what I do with these kinds of loans is I capitalize the interest or accrue the interest for a period of anywhere from 3 to 5 years. You guys understand that concept of accruing interest?
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's no income. You don't want to be paying out interest every month on a loan. Now, I gave the private equity fund a couple of alternatives here. They can just arrange a loan at 6% for 5 years with accrued interest, or if they prefer, they can, if they want to lay off the original amount, the 1.3 million needed to close it, they can lay it off and they can bring in investors, right? Because these guys, this private equity fund has a list of investors. I mean, I don't know how big the fund is, but it's a few $100 million. I know that. So they have lots of investors, and the investors would then, instead of being a loan, the investors would then buy preferred shares. You guys know the difference between preferred shares and commons, right?
Yeah.
So preferred shares, most investors prefer preferred shares. All right. And the reason for that is preferred shares have dividend protection. They have tag-along provisions, and they have a preference on wind-up or dissolution. Dividend protection means that, as let's say it was you two guys, or instead of Michael, let's say it's Jamie and Leslie are the project lead, and you have common shares. You are allowed to declare a dividend for your preferred shareholders and not for yourself, but you're not allowed to declare a dividend for yourself and not for your preferred shareholders.
Right.
That's a dividend protection, and that's the right thing to do. The other thing that happens with preferred shareholders is if there was ever a wind-up or dissolution of the company, preferred shareholders get paid out before common shareholders do.
Yeah.
Right? So they have some, and tag-along provisions are really important as well to preferred shareholders, because let's say somebody comes along and says, I love your project, I love your building, Jamie and Leslie. We just want to buy your common shares, you know, the 65% of the common shares that you own, and we'll give you a few $1 million for that. You're not allowed to sell your controlling interest without also making an offer or having that offer extended to the preferred shareholders.
Okay.
That's called a tag-along provision.
Okay.
And again, for a lot of investors, and you already know this, the way I structured is if I were going out and raising $1.3 million from investors or $13 million, doesn't really matter what it is, some of that money that investors put in will probably be in the form of debt, and some of it will probably be in the form of preferred shares.
Right. Yeah.
Right? Because a lot of investors like the idea of getting some money back, you know, they get paid back over time. Some of their debt comes back to them, and then they have some equity in the company too. From a preferred shareholder point of view, from an investor's point of view, they want to make these investments because they believe in real estate. You know, it has, hopefully it goes up in value, the mortgage goes down over time, and there's some cash flow. So they want to participate as owners, but they also don't want to do any work. And I don't have to tell you, preferred shareholders do not get a vote.
Yeah.
Like when I do these projects for myself, I use a very similar structure. And there's usually a board of directors made up of one person. That would be me. So when I want to have a meeting of the board of directors, I can go into a cupboard, have a meeting with myself, and come out with a decision 5 minutes later.
Right. Yeah.
Because the other thing that kills projects left, right, and center is when partners start to argue. So when I have two shareholders like we do here between a private equity fund and the project lead, I usually put in a voting trust. Where the project lead, in this case, maybe you two guys, have all of the votes for 5 years. So there's no question about where the buck stops,
Okay.
right? But also no question about who can make the final decision. I don't want to have any, because after 5 years, if your project's still going, it's probably going to be a huge success. I'm sure it will be right from the day one. But usually if you have a problem, it's in the first 5 years. So I use voting trusts as well, and I put the control in one party. I'm a private investor in one building now, and I said to the lead entrepreneur, because we're a group of, I think, 4 or 5, maybe 6 people in that. I said, we're going to have a voting trust for the first 5 years, and you, a project lead, are going to have control of all the votes. That's a good news story because he can make all the decisions, but it's also a bad news story because the buck stops with you.
Right. Yep.
Right.
Yep.
All right. So the total equity and shareholder debt in the company, when at the end of next month, will be at about $1.5 million, and then it's the private equity company's job to provide the entire construction loan, $10.7 million, right? And we did give them the option that if they want to reduce that for some of their investors who are a little bit shy about being such a high loan to value ratio, they can do an RRSP second mortgage. And you guys know RRSP second mortgages are allowed to go up to 100% loan to value.
Yeah.
Right. So they've got all the you know, the opportunities. But here's the thing: Michael will own 65% of the common shares, and on a diluted basis, probably not much less, certainly a majority of this company, for $130,000.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. And then, of course, once the building is built and tenanted and it's rent stabilized, probably within a year or 18 months, he will replace all of the existing debt with a takeout mortgage. In this case, he's looking at CMHC. CMHC is offering 1 to 2% on 50-year money. It's like free money.
Yeah. It is free money. It's.
It really is. Now, this is a little bit more complicated because it's a private equity fund, but let me give you another example that might be a little simpler to understand, but it's the same principle.
Yep.
Let's say, for example, I'm the entrepreneur and you're the investor.
Okay.
You know, I have $130,000 and I'm going to buy, I don't know, a duplex. And you have $70,000 and you're going to help me buy that duplex. You know, you're the rich investor, I'm the poor entrepreneur. But I do have 130 grand. So I put $130,000 into this, purchasing this duplex. You put in $70,000. We have $200,000 and we put a mortgage in place and we buy a duplex. That is a very simple form of Mad River investing. But let's say we buy the duplex, and you know, in a place like Toronto, a duplex would be very expensive. It could be, you know, $1 million easily, maybe more. But let's say it's $1 million, and you're putting in 70 grand, and I'm putting in 130. We have 200,000. But I need, in addition to that, so we've got 20% down. We can have a conventional first mortgage, but I need another $350,000 to renovate the building. You loan that to the project either as a second mortgage, or you know, just lend it to me with a promissory note back to you. That is a form of Mad River financing. So if you think about it, you as the rich investors have put in $70,000 worth of equity, so you own, you know, about you own 35% of the project, but you've also put in another $350. So you've actually put in $420,000, but most of that's in debt.
Yeah.
Now, let's just work through this one more time. So you put in 420,000, I put in 130,000. If you put all of that money in as equity, you would end up owning, I don't know, 70% of the project, and I would end up owning 30%. As an entrepreneur, that's not very interesting to me. You know, I do all the work, I found the project, I do all the renovation, I do all the tenanting, I worry about the property management, and I own a, you know, a little bit of it. So by structuring it this way, where some of the money from the rich dudes, in this case you guys, is equity and some of it is debt, it means me as the entrepreneur can own a much higher percentage of the equity. However, from your point of view, as rich dudes, it's also a very good deal for you. Number one, once your money, the $350,000 that you loan the project, either as a second mortgage or just on the basis of a promissory note, once that is retired, you now own 35% of a great project that you only have $70,000 in.
Yeah.
Right? And once that first mortgage is retired, maybe the building's worth $2 million, you own 35% of it, and you only have 70 grand as your adjusted cost base.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So from an investor's point of view who doesn't want to do a lot of work, but does want to own real estate, the Mad River financing, where you do this kind of division between debt and equity, leaves the entrepreneur with a bigger piece of the pie, but from your point of view, gives you a very low adjusted cost base and a decent ownership. And then there's one more step. All right, I'm sorry if it's a little bit complicated, but there is one more step, and I can go back to sharing my screen. And the next step I think you'll find really interesting. I call this the non-partnership partnership model. And when I mention that, people go, what the heck is that? Well, this is what Michael Rouge has been doing. If he does 6 buildings like the one we've just been going through, like this, and he sells 3 of them, all right? You know, I'm a buy and hold guy, but every once in a while, we do sell things. So if he sells 3 of them, he can make, believe it or not, about $12.8 million on each sale.
Yeah.
Now that's gross. He has to deduct, you know, realtor costs and legal fees and whatever else, capital gains taxes, but he can make that. That's his cash engine. So he went into this originally with, you know, coaching from Prof Bruce, you know, with the idea he would build a few hundred. In this case, he'd be close to 600 apartments in whatever, 10 buildings or so, maybe it's 12. And he would sell some of them, that's his cash engine, and he would keep some of them. Then, if he keeps, say, 3 of them, now if you think about it, he owns, this is approximately, he owns 2/3 of 3 buildings, and the private equity firm maybe owns 1/3 of 3 buildings. So they can then separate out. Michael could keep 2 buildings for himself at 100%, and the private equity firm could keep 1 for themselves at 100%. And the reason we do this, what I call the non-partnership partnership model, is that there's still 2 chairs in heaven waiting for the first 2 partners to get there and like each other. And what I mean by that is, let's say you and I we did 6 buildings together like this. We sold 3 of them and divided up the cash. So we're making some cash, which is good. And we kept 3 of them. Maybe I want to sell my building and run away to Costa Rica and smoke cigars and drink rum. But you guys want to continue to build your empire. Maybe we're going to end up in an argument. You know, you want to refinance them, I want to pay off the mortgage. I want to sell, you don't. That's why partners end up arguing. But if you go into it with the idea that eventually we'll separate out this way, it's a way of exiting without exiting. Do you kind of see that?
Yep. Yeah.
And it really works unbelievably well. I've been doing this now for 8 or 9 years with lots of people that I coach. And even where it's just, you know, if it was just the 3 of us doing stuff, I'm not a private equity fund, just the 3 of us doing stuff, we would do that. We would try and do 3 or 4 or 5 buildings like this, or 10 together if we decided that, and it sells some, keeps some, and then separate out.
Okay. Yep.
Now you're experts.
Yeah, no, that's interesting because so we've been learning, well, I've been focusing a lot on the financing side of things, mostly because I'm a real estate nerd and I just love to read and research and all those kinds of things. But we had a really good call with Matt that you referred us to.
Yeah, Matt Slobodia.
Yes, such a nice guy, eh? Like,
No, he's a typical Westerner, right?
yeah, no, he was amazing. So he opened our eyes to so many different things that, I mean, I knew it was out there, but I didn't know that we could qualify for it, for lack of a better explanation. But like, so like the affordable flex product that's out there, you know, we're right now we're getting all this private money at, you know, 14% from other investors.
Yeah.
Like, well, I can just get you a construction loan on it. And I was like, well, let's do that. You know, like just so
well,
many.
He did a construction loan for one of my clients at 4.5%. He was doing investor money at 12% and construction financing at 10% with 4% fees.
Yeah, like just crazy. So I mean, that's a game changer for us.
Game changer. Yeah.
And we, so the other thing is that we have these really, really great partners. Absolutely love them.
Yeah.
They are like the gold standard of people. Like they're just such kind people. They're very driven like we are. And we want to build buildings with them, but I think we need to talk to them about the non-partnership model, right?
For the future.
For the future, yeah, because
it's the right thing to do, you know, to separate up because, you know, look, you're young people and some of your investors are probably a bit older and they may have a different agenda.
Yeah, I think these guys are, yeah, we'll have to talk to them about the different options, but yeah.
But, you know, I did this with 2 brothers 3 years ago who were fighting. They had about 52 properties between the 2 of them. And I sat them down. This was I do some mediation work, not a lot, but I do some. And I sat the 2 brothers down. It took 3.5 weeks to get this thing resolved because the brothers were, geez, they really didn't like each other. But what we eventually did was I literally had, cue cards, and it wrote down the address of each property, the appraised value, the mortgage on it, you know, the equity in it, and we had 52 cards on the table. The boys, the 2 fellas, rolled the dice to see who would go first. The first guy got to pick any 2 properties on the table that he wanted, and then the next guy got to pick 4. Because I mean, when you're doing 52, you don't want to go one at a time and take forever. So the first partner, the brother Larry picked first. He got to pick 2, and then Bill picked next, he picked 4, and after that it was 2, 2, 2, 2, until at the end of the day, we had all of the properties on, you know, it was like playing Monopoly. And we had them on each side of the table, and then there was a little bit of a balance owing, I think, from Larry to Bill. So there was you know, a couple $1 million that was owing from one to the other. But because they had such low loan to value ratios, financing on it, I said to Larry, listen, raise $2 million on your portfolio is nothing, and you'll just raise a little bit of money, pull it out of your portfolio, pay your brother out. But if we hadn't done that, I mean, I thought they might kill each other. Like, it was terrible. It was just, you know, when families fight, Leslie, it's the worst.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
And these 2 guys are Italian. That should tell you something. And I was afraid to have them in the same room with each other.
Imagine, yeah, I know.
I thought one of them might pull out a knife and just.
Yeah.
So I had to calm everybody. 3.5 weeks was the worst. I was so burned out from that. I decided not to do any more mediations after that.
Yeah. Well, no, I think, like, so Jamie and I, it's very interesting to us what's been happening lately, where we've, you know, Southwestern Ontario, it's just like Ottawa. The market's insane right now. Anything
Crazy.
is like, you know, sellers aren't giving you time to do like due diligence, like whatever.
It's
so
ridiculous.
it's crazy, right? So we do have a couple really good deals that are in the works right now, and we have to get quick financing because they want the property to close in 45 days or 60 days or whatever. So anyway, we have this mortgage broker who gets private money for us, basically.
There's nothing wrong with that because private money is fast.
That's the thing, right? So she's like, she keeps telling us, she's like, this is crazy, you guys. Like, do you have any more buildings that you need to buy? Because people are lined up out the door waiting to get into deals. And we're like, what? Like, why don't you go to somebody different? But so we have the ability to.
But your mortgage broker, do you mind if I ask what her first name is?
Anna Scott.
Anna. So you should, you know, I mean, these videos that I do for you, you know, I upload them to YouTube and make sure you have them. They are confidential and they are unlisted.
Yep.
So, but I don't mind if you share it with Anna if you want to.
Sure.
But you have to ask her to treat it as confidential because we definitely don't want to make this public. This is our private business. But Anna should, in my opinion, put you in touch with at least 1 or 2 private equity firms, mortgage investment corporations, real estate investment trusts, mortgage corporations, and private equity funds, because the private equity guys are really interested in real estate. It's, you know, for years, the only thing that they wanted to talk about was tech. But let's say we were to put $12 million into a tech startup and it doesn't work. How much of that 12 million are we going to get back?
Well, and we don't have a private equity firm, do we?
Yeah, but she should be able to, Anna should be able to reach out to private equity funds. She should. Your mortgage brokers, like the ones that I use, should know mix, you know, mortgage investment corporations, mortgage corporations, real estate investment trusts, and private equity firms. Like there's quite a number of them in Canada who, and they, you know, 5 years ago or 10 years ago, you might not have got a whole lot of interest in real estate, but a Blackstone group in the United States in 2008, 2009, but, you know, I think it is the largest private equity fund in the world. I think they have like $1 trillion worth of assets under management. They put together a portfolio of 50,000 residential single-family homes for rent in, like, I think under a year. When, you remember the 2008-9 financial meltdown? Blackstone said, well, maybe we should do some real estate. And they bought 50,000 homes in less than a year. I'm pretty sure it was less than a year. And, you know, obviously in foreclosure, so they didn't pay very much for it. And then about 4 or 5 years later, they took it public. And I think they made billions of dollars on that. I mean, I could look it up, and so could you. So private equity funds, when they saw Blackstone made billions of dollars, they are looking for entrepreneurs like you, Leslie, and Jamie. You understand? And if Anna Scott is going to help you with financing, she's got to understand the stuff that I'm talking about. And if she doesn't do it, I apologize, Anna, if you're watching this, but if you don't feel comfortable doing it, then I'll introduce you to some people who will do it.
Yeah, so I think Anna would feel comfortable doing that. Anna's,
yeah, I mean, she and you know, how old is Anna?
She's retired, so she retired, and she's a super genius.
Well, would she be in her 50s?
Mid-60s?
Mid-60s, probably.
Yeah, well, I'm 69, and like I told you earlier on, I learn new things every week. I mean, you know, I think the difference, Leslie, between an old person and a young person isn't necessarily just the number of years, you know, the number of times you go around the sun. It's also whether you're open to learning new things.
Yeah.
Oh, and Anna is.
Yeah. No, Anna.
Yeah, and you know, I know old 30-year-olds, and so do you. You know some people who say, hey, you can't teach me anything. I know everything. That person is old. He or she may be 30, but they're old. Once you stop learning, human beings are, you know, we've got these, you know, huge brains and these fingers and opposable thumbs. We're meant to learn new things. We're meant to work. We're not supposed to just sit around and watch TV all day.
Yeah, no, and that's Anna, 100%.
And that's Anna. And so she's probably a young 65-year-old. And she probably has already done some stuff like this, but maybe you haven't been asking her the right questions. But if she is struggling a little bit, bring her onto one of these calls and we'll talk together.
Okay. Yeah, no, fair enough. She's
once you have somebody like Anna in your court and you trust her and you like her, that's it, stick with her. But she has to help you get in touch with, especially if you're going to do 20-story, 30-story buildings, you need to access lower cost funds, and you need to, Michael will do this project with 130 grand. It's a $12 million project. That's like 1%.
I can do 15 of those at a time.
I know that. So, I mean, there's no reason why, and you know, that's exactly the point. Like Michael has the capacity to do it without the private equity fund, but he's very ambitious. He wants to do, he's done, after this one, he'll be close to 600 units, but he'd like to do, like Blackstone, he'd like to do 50,000, but you can't do 50,000 on your own. Blackstone has investors, $1 trillion under management. I'm pretty sure it's something like $1 trillion. So that's what I'm trying to introduce to you, because I know you guys are very ambitious.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. So Jamie, you asked me something else too, and I'll show you this. You asked me to talk to you about a pro forma, okay?
Yeah.
A typical pro forma, and you should be able to see on the screen right now a spreadsheet.
Yes. Yeah.
And again, this is confidential information, okay, guys?
Yep.
All right. So this is a typical, very simple pro forma that I put together for a project this is actually a project in downtown Ottawa, okay?
Yep.
And again, and I'm going to email you guys the development manager thing. It's 10 pages long. You can read that, all right?
Okay.
All right, so you should read it, because you should be doing your own development management work. I mean, when you get to the size and scale that I was when I was with the Senators, you can hire development managers. But when you're doing your first 20-story building or first 10-story building, or whatever, 5-story building, you can do your own development management work. So I'll send you that, read it. So you start with what's called a functional program. So you visit a site, you look at the the neighborhood, you come up with some ideas as to what makes sense here, what would work financially, what would work for the neighborhood, etc. And you end up with a functional program. So this particular site is downtown Ottawa. It's 12,000 square feet. It allows coverage of 85%. Do you understand what that is, coverage?
Yep, land coverage.
Yeah, so you have to keep 15% of it for, I don't know, flowers and trees, bees and bunnies. So you've got a floor area of 10,000 square feet. And in the basement of this particular building, which is going to be quite a large auditorium, is a theater. It's called the Ottawa Little Theater. It's been around for over 100 years, and they're going to occupy the basement area. The reason they were putting them underground is you don't need windows for a theater, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
So they go on underground. So they're going to take 12,000 square feet. Do you notice how the floor plan, or the floor plate, excuse me, of the little theater below grade is actually bigger than at grade and above?
Yeah.
Yeah, because you can go up to the property line.
Exactly. You know, most people don't know that you own the rights under your building right to the center of the earth, in theory.
Yeah.
Right? And so once you're below grade, you can go right to the property lines. And so a lot of architects don't know that. And they put the parkade under a building, and all the parkades in the buildings I built go right to the property line. So you've got your building here, your parkade or your parking garage is bigger, or your workshops.
Yeah.
So it's a way of creating more space without having to buy any more land.
Yeah.
All right. So there's the lobby. Then there's some commercial space at grade, which includes their ticket office, a cafe. Guess what? The cafe is double loaded. You guys are experts at that now, right?
Yeah.
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 And their merchandise shop is double loaded.
Okay.
All right. So most theaters is, you go inside and that's where you buy, the merchandise. Makes no sense. You got 10,000 people a day walking by. It should serve the theater goers on the inside, but it should serve the passers-by too.
Yep.
Right. You get a lot more rent. Same thing for the restaurant. Then after that's at grade, the next two floors are co-working spaces and maker spaces. I love maker spaces, as you know. And then the third floor is health, fitness, and wellness center. And then on the next number of floors, this is a project that we're doing for the University of Ottawa. Okay, it's a downtown university, and so they are going to end up with micro suites. The micro suites are around 345 square feet. UBC did a project similar to this, University of British Columbia. Their micro suites were so tiny, they were 145 square feet.
Yikes.
145 square feet. And they were so small, they didn't call them micro suites, they called them nano suites. Nano is very small.
Yeah.
All right. So University of Ottawa is not going in that direction. They're going 345. You lose about 30% of your floor plate to circulation space.
Okay.
This building has 23 floors of micro suites. It's 24 stories above grade. The number of micro suites in this building is 485. I think this is all connected. Let's just change this number just for the hell of it. If I went with the UBC number, I'll change the 345 to 145. Let's see what happens. So I put 145 here. If I hit enter, let's watch what happens to the yellow. It goes to 1100.
Wow.
So I'm going to go back to that. But I have clients in Shanghai. In Shanghai, they would definitely go with 145 square feet. They would put 1,100 micro suites in this building instead of 500. So that's something for you guys to think through carefully. It does have 5 levels of underground parking, and it ends up with 111 spaces. Now, I'm going to skip down here to the cap rate. So the cap rate on this building, guys, is only 5%. And you remember I said earlier on that you should not do a new building unless you can get to 6 or 7, or like Michael's doing 8 or even 9, which is fantastic. But this is a university project, and there's some factors that you should know as to why this is a 5% number and not higher. One of the factors is the Ottawa Little Theater is paying $2 a year in rent.
Okay.
So if you provide a tenant with $2 a year in rent, that obviously is going to reduce your cap rate. Okay. The other reason why it's lower is a percentage of these units is reserved for elders. So this is a really new concept. Again, it's confidential because the project didn't go ahead last year because of COVID-19. So it's on hold, but it will go ahead. And again, we cannot make this public, right, guys?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So the University of Ottawa, I can't remember the number. It's in the spreadsheet somewhere. they're reserving, I think, 10% of their units for elderly people.
Okay.
The idea is that, you know, if you have just, you know, 19, 20, 21, 22-year-olds in a building, it's going to be party central.
Yeah.
And the university said, no, we're going to put some seniors in here, and we'll charge them some rent, but it will be below market rents for the seniors. So we'll try and help out seniors, because seniors are the fastest growing number of impoverished people in Canada are elders. It's not single mothers are having a tough time, but the elderly are having a worse time. Again, the cap rate would be higher if all of these units were rented, you know, at market. But the university said, no, we're going to have some elders in here, and there's going to be some reverse mentoring. Reverse mentoring is when, you know, older people mentor younger people, much as I'm doing with you. But reverse mentoring is when the students actually mentor the elders. And I'll give you an example. When we're talking 80-year-olds, some of my former students actually do volunteer work where they teach elderly people how to get on Facebook so they could talk to their granddaughter.
Yeah.
Or how to build an Etsy store. I've got one student who helped an elderly senior. She's in her 80s. She knits baby caps, you know, for babies. Beautiful baby caps, you know, that'll say, you know, Johnny or Susie, and they're just beautiful. And this particular lady, she's in her 90s now. She knits baby caps, sells them on Etsy. You guys know what Etsy is? Yeah, sells them on Etsy, and she has a whole crew of ladies in the retirement residence where she is doing that, and the business is successful. So older people can help younger people, but younger people can also help the elders. And the other factor that depressed their cap rate is the university is going to reserve a number of units for EIRs, entrepreneurs in residence. So somebody like me, for example, might be invited to come and live in the building for, you know, 6 months, rent free, and in return I might provide some mentoring and coaching to the people on my floor. You sort of see what I'm getting at? So this number is not really reflective of the of what is possible with this building, but it reflects what the university's program is. And from the university's point of view, 5% they think is terrific.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
You know, I mean, a university, if they have an endowment fund that makes 1.1%, they have a party.
Yeah.
I said 5%. Whoa, that's really good. I said, okay. All right. So this is how you build a very simple pro forma, Jamie. So the commercial space it's going to be $40 a square foot, triple net. That's pretty high. I wanted to put in a percentage rent, but the university didn't really understand that. So again, that's not here, but if it was your building, we would definitely put in a percentage rent, right?
Yeah.
Okay. The co-working and maker spaces will be about $30. The health, fitness and wellness center will be about $26. The micro suites will be about $1,100 or $1,200, plus tech packages, plus utilities. Parking is very expensive in Ottawa, even more in Toronto, and certainly in New York City, it's out of sight. $285 for a parking space. Then you end up with your triple net revenues, and then you get your gross revenues, and you can see this is my 64% number here. Do you see that, Jamie? That means that OPEX is eating up about 36%. And again, on a new build, if it was 28%, it is much more likely a number. So if I change this number from 64% to say 72%, watch what happens to the cap rate. Okay, I'll just do that here. I'll put 72 in, and I'll hit enter, and you can see the cap rate has gone up by half a point.
Yeah.
All right, so it's very, very sensitive to those kinds of things. And what's really great about, and I'll send you this spreadsheet, but again, you cannot share it, right?
That's fine.
It's just for you guys. I'll send it to you. You can see by linking all of these things together, you can play with these spreadsheets so you can really understand and learn how sensitive it is to changes like that.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
And how important it is. That's called sensitivity testing, okay? All right.
Set up, but nothing
Not
for
for land
for
development.
new builds, right? It's all just our rental first, strategy essentially.
No, one thing that, so like most of the cities have development charges.
Yes.
Now, is that typically like a per square foot fee? Is that a cost per build? I mean, how do you figure that out? So,
Okay, so in Ottawa, and this is pretty typical of different cities. So in Ottawa, on a single family home, I think it's about $35,000 in development charges on a house in the suburbs. I think it's less in the inner city and more in the suburbs because they figure, you know, the cost of providing services and transit to suburbs is higher.
yeah,
So let's say you guys were building a house in Ottawa. Development charge is separate from a building permit. Right? Building permit is usually a few $1,000s, and the development charge is like tens of thousands.
yeah.
All right. So so if you were building a house in Ottawa, you would pay $35,000 approximately in development charges. If you were building a house with a basement apartment, it's still $35,000 because the city of Ottawa wants to charge the second development charge on the in-home apartment, but the province stepped in and said, not so fast.
Okay.
No.
Yeah.
You know, the province recognizes we have a crisis in affordable housing. So let's say you owned a house in Ottawa and you apply to put a basement apartment in. Cities like Toronto, like Ottawa, many of them wanted to apply a second development charge, and the province stepped in and said, no, there's no new infrastructure. You know, you're not putting in another road because you've got an in-home apartment in your house. You know, cities basically like two things, politicians like two things, money and power. And if they can tax something, if it's moving, living and breathing, they will tax it. But the province said, to heck with that, no. So anyway, so a single family home would be that. If you were building I don't know, a 54 unit apartment in Ottawa, I think it's about $19,000 in development charges per door.
Per door.
So yeah, something like that. In Waterloo and Kitchener, you just have to ask, you know, the local town official. He or she will tell you in a second on how many units are you building there. It was quite a few.
360 bedrooms, so we were thinking somewhere around
205, I think.
205 units.
Yeah, 205 units. So I know the development charge. I have a client in Waterloo and I have a client in Kitchener as well. I know the development charges are lower. So it wouldn't surprise me though if they're $8,000 or $10,000 or $12,000 a door.
Per door. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Now the good news is you don't have to pay your development charge until you pick up your building permit.
Okay.
All
okay.
right. So it's not like you file your building permit, you know, and then they say, oh, great, 200 times 10,000 is $2 million. Can we have a check for $2 million? But when you go to pick up your building permit, they will expect a check. All right. And on the commercial space, Leslie, you will also pay development charges, but those are per square foot. Okay. And again, in Ottawa, I think today we're paying about $18 a square foot for development charges on commercial space.
Wow.
So yeah, it's a lot. So if we're building, say 10,000, or Michael's building 12,000 square feet, if he was doing it in Ottawa, he would pay $18 a square foot. So, you know, what's that? It's a few $100,000.
So would your maker spaces be considered commercial then?
That's really interesting. There are different categories. We have maintained that our maker spaces are industrial spaces, and the development charge is half what it is for commercial.
Okay.
Industrial.
So well, I think in Ottawa it's exactly half.
Okay.
And because I built some in Ottawa, and I argued exactly what, that was a really good question, Jamie. I argued exactly that point, right? That, you know, and I argued it in one. So instead of paying, back then when I built them, I think it was $15, and I ended up paying $7.50 a square foot. So you can argue, you know, but you have to argue early.
Yes, yeah.
Because if once your building permit is ready for delivery, you cannot spend 6 months debating with the city whether it's $7.50 or $15.
Yeah.
Because that difference, you'll lose that in the first month you're delayed.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So I argue these things as fast and as early as I can and say, oh, this, we're paying this DC. And I get a letter out of the city, so I know exactly what they're going to be. And then we argue. And you have the right as developers to ask every city and town in Ontario for a letter that specifies exactly what the development charges are going to be.
Okay.
All right, and you're going to need that.
Okay.
All right, let me go back to this spreadsheet. We're almost done. So, so this building here, the reason I said that your costs at $190 for a concrete building is unbelievable. Our estimate for our building, this building, the university's building, was $350 a square foot, so almost double what you're paying.
Wow.
So it's $100 million to construct. The land value back then was $4 million. I think it's more today. Then you've got soft costs, which are 8% of your construction. That's for architects, consulting engineers, etc., soils, etc. You've got financing, 6%. The university will probably be less than that. I think we can get that in around 4.5 or 5. Financing fees, we can probably get that down as well because it's the university. I mean, their credit rating is very good. They put in a 7% contingency budget, so about $7 million in contingencies. There's a development management fee. I was going to act as their development manager with my own team, so that was a significant proportion of the budget. So the total cost was around $138 million, and it was a 5% cap rate. So that's the kind of spreadsheet that you could build, Jamie. This is not rocket science. And I'll send you this, and you'll have no problem, I'm sure, putting together a spreadsheet like this. And they're very, very useful. One of the things that I do, once I have an agreement with even before I have an agreement with my general contractor, my GC, is I'll provide him or them with the budget and say, look, I need your comments on this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea to do it that way, right?
By that time it's open book, because what you don't want is, you don't want to pay, even though I put 8% of construction costs in there for architect, engineers, consulting engineers, etc., and GC, I don't actually pay them a percentage of that. That's just an allowance.
Yeah.
And we fix those fees, and once they're fixed, then their job and my job is to deliver a good quality building at the most reasonable cost we can. I'm not necessarily trying to achieve the cheapest cost. I'm trying to achieve the best quality building at the most reasonable price, as opposed to the cheapest. Now, there was one other thing on your agenda. Well, there's more than one other thing, but one thing you asked me about, which I'm not really sure how to answer, Jamie, so it was a really good question, is it worthwhile doing a net zero building, or at least close to net zero building, for a rental? So I don't know how to answer that.
So it's for condos.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we've been looking at net zero buildings to sell office condo units.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, especially like Waterloo is one of those very progressive cities, right? Where they're trying to bring in some more green and energy efficient and all that kind of stuff. So, and I think actually that, I can't remember if it's Kitchener or Waterloo, one of them actually has grants for that kind of thing. And then we also just, our partners on this deal are, they've been researching different cities just in Ontario in general that have, some of them are up to like $4 million grants.
Yep. No, I'm very familiar with that. See, if it's a condo building, then you can definitely increase your price because you're delivering a product that will perform better. Yeah. So on a condo building, I don't have a problem by saying, trying to be, I sent you that list of mine, which is, it's not net zero, but it's green for real. There's a lot of green BS, you know that, eh? There's a lot of green BS out there. But I mean, things like having an all-off switch is so simple. All of my home building clients now, whether they're building condos or they're building you know, a single family home, they all are putting, it's so simple to do, an all-off switch. So when you're leaving in the morning, you know, I have 5 kids, a mother, a wife, a mother-in-law, a nanny, etc. If I'm the last person leaving there, you know, at our place, I just hit an all-off switch and everything turns off in the house. I don't have to run around and turn everything off because you know when you have kids, I mean, they live, everything's left on, and you can reduce energy uses with an all-off switch by probably 15%. You know, just by being able to push a button, everything shuts down. Not your freezer, not your fridge, not your furnace. You know, those are excluded, obviously. So there's some, and that's like a, you know, maybe it's $120 electrician bill to if you do it when you're building new. So having an all-off switch is a really smart thing to do from a green point of view. Very inexpensive to do, and the ROI on that, I bet you it's 1,000% or 10,000%. Doesn't matter. It's just fantastic. But there's lots of green stuff out there that doesn't make any sense at all, financial sense. And I have a theory that everything. Nothing is sustainable unless it's also economically sustainable. So I am not, you know, even if somebody gave me $4 million of free money, I want to invest that in ways that produces a return on investment for the earth, but also a financial return. I think that's really important. So I do insist on all the projects that I'm involved in that any green initiatives actually make financial sense too.
Okay.
Right, and so I sent you that list. And net zero to me is a goal, but I'm not going to get there until it makes sense. For example, an EV, an electric vehicle, makes a lot of sense if you could buy it for $30,000, but maybe not so much if you buy it for $300,000. I don't want to spend $300,000 on a car. Now, back in the day, an electric vehicle could go 40 kilometers and cost you $300,000. It's green, but not really.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I do believe that nothing is sustainable unless it's also economically sustainable. All right? So on condos, on single family homes, you know, those sort of things, definitely net zero or something that's approximating that or heading in that direction makes sense. The question is, does it make sense for rentals?
I don't know if we would do it for a rental. I mean, maybe here on the island, a luxury rental is a little bit different, but
you know, when you asked me that question, Jamie, I went, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I just don't know. I think if you look at it this way, let's say we do green for real as opposed to greenwashing. So we do green for real, and we do some simple things, like put in an all-off switch, and we can reduce the energy consumption in our building by 15%. I do think that some of those cost savings you could pass on to your tenants. That's a good thing. And some of it you can keep, right? So some of it goes to boost your profitability and some of it goes to help your tenants. So I think you could do some of that stuff. For example, in all of our buildings, you guys know this already, I put in Nest thermostats, which are quite expensive. You know, they're $250 or $300. But it means that my tenants, if I have a duplex and there's only one heating system, you know, rather than calling our property management people say, I'm too hot, I'm too cold, I'm too hot, I'm too cold, they can just go on, use their smartphone and they can adjust the you know, up or down. We've had situations, I'm sure you've had it too, in some of our buildings where somebody goes to the Caribbean like you guys are, and they turn the heat down to 55 degrees Fahrenheit. Because they don't need the heat on while they're gone, and not realizing that maybe they're sharing the system with somebody else and they're freezing while you guys are in the Caribbean. Again, if you have a Nest T-stat you can control from here, you can change that. As property owner, we can change that. So we do put in some green for real stuff, like all-off switches and Nest thermostats, and it really does pay dividends. But I'm not sure if it's paying financial dividends as much as it is tenant satisfaction.
yeah.
And you know, and as you know, having tenants stay in your building for 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 years, as opposed to turning them over every year, is a huge plus, right? Because tenant churn can kill your profitability in no time at all. So maybe, Jamie, the answer is maybe.
Maybe.
Yeah, okay.
To a certain point.
To a certain point, I think you guys, and if you look through that list, there's some things that we do in our rental properties. Like I said, the Nest thermostat, which has been really, really a lifesaver for us. We also put in keypad locks. We go with those Yale keypad locks. And again, they're pretty expensive, you know, to put in a little, you know, to have, but if you have 352 units, do you really want to have 352 sets of keys? Times, I don't know, times 3, 1 for the tenant, maybe 2 for, if it's a shared, 2 for the tenants and 2 for yourself. You know, you have 1,000, 2,000 sets of keys. We've replaced them all with, almost all of our buildings now have keypad locks, and that costs us money, but I'm sure it saves us on the property management side just a ton of money. And of course, when a tenant leaves, again, from your phone, you don't even have to go there. You can change the keypad lock. If your tenant gets locked out at 11 o'clock on a Saturday night, you don't have to get out of bed and go open the door because they lost their key. You can just open it up if they forgot their code.
Yeah.
So I think there's some operational advantages, and there's certainly some savings that can happen, some of which can come to you and some of which can go. So, but I wasn't sure if I could give you a blanket yes on it.
Okay. Well,
We did quite a bit on this friggin' 2 hours.
yes.
Yeah.
All right, listen, guys, don't be strangers. I want a mid-month report from you sometime in the next 10 days or 2 weeks. I want to know what you're doing. I want to see what progress you're making. You got to reach out to me and include your coach in some of the decisions that you're making, because you're making some big decisions. A 20 or 30 story building, you got to do it right.
Yeah.
For sure.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, guys. And I'll send you the development manager thing, and I'll send you the spreadsheet, Jamie, so you can play with it. And I'll have this YouTube recording for you tomorrow.
Okay.
Thanks, Bruce.
Thanks, Bruce.
Have a great time, you guys.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.